Now we're ready to move on to our dent here that is underneath the brace. So I went ahead and cut the glue out from underneath the bracing, and we're going to try a different technique. I'm going to go ahead and use a wedging technique to create the pressure we need to hold stability while repairing the dent. Again, if you come up here, you can really flex the panel, you know. We got a lot of dent right here. In fact, this one's deeper than the other one. We got a lot of dent that's going to have to be absorbed into the circumference around the damage. So let's go ahead and get to it. What we have here, the damage is right through here. What I have here is a little bit of a gap or an opening up here. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take this window wedge here and I'm going to jam it in there. Back here on this edge, driving some pressure on the back side of the dent. There we go. Got it in place there. Now what I'm going to do to hold this secure, because when you start pushing, this brace is going to flex and bend. And believe it or not, I somehow ran out of duct tape. Do not know how that happened, but I guess it did. So I'm going to try a little bit of masking tape and see if that's secure enough to actually hold it into position. So we're going to go ahead and look at the top side, and we'll show you kind of what this is doing as far as creating stability around the dent. There we go. I mean, as you can see here, it's actually tightened up the entire panel all the way around it. So that's going to hold this stable in the center of the damage while we concentrate our pushes. Again, we're going to use a close fog so I can watch the bottom and the interior of the dent just rise up with little bitty pushes. So this is how we're going to work it, guys. I've got it put into position, and we'll go ahead and get busy on it. This is my setup with the masking tape. It's definitely not as strong as duct tape, but I think that it'll do. It's definitely staying in place so far, so we'll have to monitor that as we progress with the repair. Just a note here as well, this is how I'm going to be pushing during the repair process. I'm going to be using this pink handled whale tail. Now it's certainly not as sharp as the circus tool, but it is definitely good enough. You know, these edges right here can definitely do some shrinking within the panel, and this is how we're going to do it, right up through the brace here. I'm going to be twist pushing throughout the whole procedure. Sometimes I might be using the back of the tool, other times I might be using the front of it, palm up or knuckles up. A lot of times something you're going to note here is that you have more range when you're going palm up. When you go knuckles up, your knuckles actually hit the top of the panel. So if you ever need a push where you need a little bit additional drive, palm up will always give you the best range of motion. All right, everybody, so again, we've got a close fog right here. This one is quite deep, so I'm having a little bit of problem seeing the very, very bottom of it. Got the fog about as close as I would want it. However, something that you're going to find very useful is that if you watch the perimeter of the dent and how it flexes during the pushing process, you can begin to pinpoint where your tool is in the center. But you got to be careful, because if you can't see it while you're pushing it, there's a chance you could leave an aggressive pock mark on the bottom of the dent. We want to try to stay away from that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here and we'll start pushing it out. Again, with the whale tail. Very little pushes. You don't want no aggressive push marks on the interior of this dent, especially right here at the beginning. That's definitely the worst time to make aggressive push marks. You'll literally be fighting it all the way to the end of the repair. And just a note here, I do have my cross-checking light ready to go. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to use it until I get this thing shallowed up. Something I think of when I'm pushing these dents, I'm always trying to minimize the amount of cross-checking work that I have while doing these repairs. One of the ways that I do that is I think in circles and I think left to right. You're always going to be cross-checking. When you cross-check, it's because you put cornrows in it going forward. Essentially straight lines in the repair. So when you try to take your push pattern and make it naturally from left to right or in a circular motion, generally you're going to wind up with less cross-checking work. Still going to have to cross-check no matter what. However, anything that will minimize that and save us some time, in the end, is going to make us more money. And that's truly the end all, what we're doing here. We're trying to learn how to make more money, live happier, and become better and better at what we do. So little by little, you can see I'm starting to get the texture up pretty nice. It's starting to shrink up a little bit. Definitely happy so far. Haven't had any movement out of the window wedge. It's been hanging in there nicely. But this is really going to allow me, just by adding that window wedge in there and stabilizing my pushes, big difference on a repair like this. I mean, otherwise, the whole thing is just buckling up and going into a peak before. Imagine this. If I didn't have the stability here, the whole center of this dent is buckling up and moving as a flimsy panel would, moving up and absorbing into the outer panel here. It's real flimsy, and as it peaks up to the top, I'm able to make a push, but it's aggressively pushing towards the outer edges. Now what this does right here is creates a nice stable panel. Very little movement. You've seen the movement we had earlier on this repair. Look at this. I can't even hardly budge this thing. So this has created the stability that we need to move the metal and not the surrounding perimeter. So that's the goal. That's what the stability technique is about. It's about holding it nice and tight so we can actually work the bottom and work the core without pushing it into the flimsy panel around it. And a lot of times what you guys might not, realize is that this metal around here, when this is hit in that deep, the center of this dent is stronger than the flimsy metal around it. So the only way that you can truly isolate your pushes and really make them pushes count is create stability in the surrounding, in the circumference around the dent. So we'll keep on pushing here. Again, paying close attention to the interior of this damage. Very little pushes. During the shrinking process, you are going to find yourself maybe have a little bit of a funky pattern on the interior of the dent, and that's okay. That, as long as it's not super aggressive, like a giant hard high spot that begins to crack at the top, then that's when you've definitely over pushed. These little pushes that I'm making here, they're shrinking pushes, but they're not over pushing the panel. So essentially I'm shrinking the damage, getting the core out, the main impact point, without over pushing the center, creating irreversible pock marks. That's what you need to worry about. It's not the little bitty pushes where I'm making hundreds of pushes right here. It's the irreversible ones. The ones that are pushed in there so high that you couldn't even do a little 2000 wet sanding and buff them out. Now that's when you're in territory that's a little bit rough. You know, you never want to take one there. And really, the stability technique here aids in that process. Because when the whole panel is just flimsy while you're pushing, it's moving up and down, it's really hard to gauge your pushes. You don't have that comfort and that stable environment. It's funny that I say it that way, but it's true. It's a stable environment that you're creating for your pushes. So now we got it pushed up rather nice. Definitely got the core of the dent up. So I'm going to do a little bit of tapping work, kind of flowing out the edges. We're going to do some more pushes, and we're going to get to a point where I'm going to decide to go ahead and pull the wedge. At that time, we're going to see the panel in its natural position.